Alright everyone, welcome to my first video here for my YouTube series. Today we're going to be just covering a general overview of the deck I've been playing for a pretty long time there. Been fluctuating between different control variants throughout my time in Modern's history. Currently we are on a deck popularized by an SCG grinder by the name of Benjamin Nikolic. What he's basically got it boiled down to is a Jeskai long game control deck, utilizing cards such as Quad Set of Path to Exile, along with a Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix split 3 and 3, and complemented with 2 Lightning Helix and 2 Supreme Verdicts. Now, alongside our removal, we do have a handful of counters just to make sure that things that we don't want resolving do not resolve. And that is comprised of 3 Logic Knot, which is actually a really great card. I mean, it's based in more often than not, you're looking at a card that reads Counterspell, and you remove a couple cards in your graveyard. And it's just basically a better Condescend as the game goes along, because you pay 2 blue, and then either any extra mana you have lying around, or cards in your graveyard, or both. And it does work with the 4 Snapcasters that we're running in the deck. In addition to that, we have a single Negate, which is just a useful 2 mana counter spell against a lot of the stuff that we can't deal with our removal spells. So things like artifacts and enchantments or planeswalkers for that type of situation. And then we do have 4 Cryptic Commands, which are basically our Swiss Army knife. Lets you counter your spells, return problematic permanents to wherever they've come from, either our cards or their cards. A lot of times you're just wanting to buy time, so you're basically tapping all their creatures and drawing a card, which is the 4th mode on the Cryptic Command. So basically, it's a Swiss Army knife. It's either a counterspell dismiss mode, basically, or it's a tap bounce. It's a draw tap. It's whatever you need it to be. And you can always shave some copies post-board, but you want 4 in the main deck just to deal with the stuff that you're most worried about. And then in addition, like I said, we have 4 Snapcaster Mages, which let us flash back all of our removal spells. We do have 4 Serum Visions, which is just a card that lets us dig and find our lands and set up future draw steps for what we think we need to draw. And we do have 2 Search for Escanta. So unless we're running 3 for a little bit, I've shaved the 3rd copy just because sometimes I did notice a little bit of redundancy in seeing multiple copies. The 3rd one is still very valuable though, but that slot right now is actually being taken up by another card, which I'll mention in a minute. But Search for Escanta is kind of the backbone of the current control decks. It lets you just dig very deep. You don't have to flip the card. So if they've got like multiple Tectonic Edge, Ghost Quarter type effects, and you know you're not going to be able to utilize it properly, you're fine having it be a Think Tank, which is basically just going to control the top of your deck. So you get to the mid-late game, you don't want to be drawing your fetch lands that have pretty much run out of targets. Getting rid of, say, a Logic Knot or Negate in matchups like Humans that you know you're not going to be able to utilize properly just because their stuff is going to be uncounterable. Stuff like that you can get rid of by just keeping it active and making sure you hit the cards that you want to hit as quick as possible and to keep you in the game. But yeah, other than that, we have really only a couple cards that are actually going to win us the game. We have right now the 1 copy of Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which is kind of what the flex slot I want to say in the deck is right now. The rest of the deck is pretty locked in, but there is that 1 slot I like to play around with. Right now it is currently Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which basically just allows you to make a steady stream of 2/2 tokens. You can just pop it instantly if you've already secured the waste and you draw it, and you can just go for that Alpha Strike. Or you can just himself become a 5/5 threat. If you're not worried about Path to Exile or whatnot, just +1 it, get in that red zone, and make things die, and win the game as quickly as possible. But more often than not, you're just making tokens to chump, buy yourself some more time. That's what this deck is designed to do, is just basically draw your deck out as much as possible to the point where you're going to win the late game versus 98% of the other decks in the metagame. some decks are designed to go longer, but for the most part, we're designed to get there and keep you in the game as long as possible. In addition to the Gideon of Alexander card, we have one Secure the Waste with which to make a flurry of tokens. You don't have to go for like a big secure for 8-9 tokens at the end of an opponent's turn. You can just throw secure down there, turn 3, 4, 5, something like that. If you're in danger of taking lethal damage within a couple turns and you know you just need that window to buy yourself some time, throwing some tokens down, throwing them in the way of a couple Tarmogoyfs, something like that, you know you can flash it back, and that's its power, is that it can be used early, or it can be used late, or it can be used in the mid-game, it can be used whenever you need it to. And I definitely like that card over something like White Sun Zenith, just because it's a single white mana plus any extra mana you have to dump on it. And finally, we do have 2 copies of the new Dominaria card, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. This card is pretty much exactly what we wanted for control in modern purposes. Yes, he is a 5-mana Planeswalker. However, he's actually better than Jace the Mind Sculptor, which I know it's hard to believe. It's, Jace is the Wallet Sculptor. He's been around for a dog's age at this point. Teferi, he is a new kid on the block, but he's also been around for a while as a character, and he's only gotten better. His original incarnation was amazing as a sideboard card in the times when Splinter Twin was a thing. But now we just have a card that lets you pay 5 mana, draw a card instantly when he comes down, and then at the end of your turn, you get 2 mana back. So you're only really investing 5 mana for that turn, and then you get 2 mana with which to cast a card that you just drew. So hopefully you're drawing like a Lightning Bolt or a Logic Knot, something that you can do with that mana. And if you are gifted with a chance to untap with the Fairy, you're now plus 2 mana every turn, which if you've got an active Ascanta, it lets you Ascanta on your turn, and then untap it, and Ascanta again on your opponent's turn, which at that point you're just going to bury your opponent card advantage. Sometimes you need to remove problematic permanents like a Blood Moon or a Snaring Bird if you want to go for the win, additional Planeswalkers, enchantments, whatever you need to do. He will remove it for a couple turns, tuck it away into your opponent's deck, third from the top. So a lot of times you just might be casting 5 mana, put something on top for a couple turns. The first one's going to die. That's totally fine. But a second one in the deck. And it doesn't take very long, only 4 turns to get up to the ultimate ability. So on that 5th turn, you're basically making an emblem where every card that you're drawing is now exiling your opponent's permanent. So you don't need to necessarily have another win condition. You can win with a Snapcaster if your opponent has no cards in play, and they just have a bunch of cards they're discarding to hand size. And he can theoretically actually be a win condition himself, in the sense that you can -8, have an emblem going, and then just keep milling them out by putting him on top of your library. Because it's -3, you can actually -3 put Teferi on top as like your last card, and you can keep doing that, and eventually your opponent will deck out, barring them having their own Teferi or an Emrakul or something like that shuffles back in. But yeah, he's actually a win condition in of himself, which is actually really amazing. And beyond that, we do have 3 Celestial Colonnades, which are part of the 24 lands that we run. I do like to run 1 Field of Ruin just to answer problematic lands like Tron lands, Man lands from opposing control decks, or Jund. But yeah, 8 fetch lands, 4 Flooded Strand, alongside 4 Scalding Tarns. We have 3 basics in the form of Island and 1 in Plains. And then some different dual lands there with which to cast our multitude of spells. 1 Glacial Fortress and 2 Sulphur Falls right now are my 3 buddy lands, as they're called. They work great in conjunction with the 2 Steam Vents, which is your blue-red Island Mountain fetchable land, and then the 2 Hollow Fountain. And we do have 1 Sacred Foundry in there as well, which a lot of times having that 3rd fetchable red source is super important. And finally, we do have our sideboard, which right now I've got settled on 2 Celestial Purge. Super important against Hollow One and just Blood Moon, stuff like that. Anything black-red related, you can just remove 2 mana, not worry about it. We do have one Settled Wreckage, which is an additional sweeper. Super important in the Hollow 1 matchup, which is a bit rough game 1, but improves immensely post-board. We have one Baneslayer Angel, which is just basically an all-around house against aggro decks, affinity, humans, burn for the life gain. It's just definitely a card that you want to be having. Pardon me, against a lot of stuff. We have one Elspeth Sun's Champion, which is your Haymaker. It's going to come in against a lot of creature and mid-range type decks. Where decks are going to gum the board, we're just going to throw down Elspeth and gum it up harder. We have two Dampening Sphere, which is basically a card for Tron and Affinity, or not Affinity, but Storm, and Amulet Titan if you have to face it, because what it does is it makes their against Tron and Amulet, it makes their double lands only produce one colorless instead. So you can actually play with the mana there a little bit from Amulet and potentially get a free win in some cases if they don't have the double blue or double green to pay for one of their packs. And it just slows them down enough that you can get a good chance at winning. And same with Storm. It's not so much the lands part, but it's each player casts one more mana for every spell that they've cast that turn. So it basically makes every Storm card cost additional mana, and it forces them to answer it before they can realistically go off. We have one copy of Wear and Tear, along with one Engineered Explosive, which is our catch-all answers for problematic permanents. And we have some blue cards, which are just additional counters in the form of 2 Dispel, for instance, 1 Spell Snare, which I've been bringing in against a lot of decks, but I don't like it main deck just because it is dead in some matchups. So I like having it in the sideboard as a way to shore it up and bring it in against like Affinity, Burn, the Mirror, Storm, just a lot of magnitude decks where you want it. And we have a second Negate, again for problematic permanents, and followed up with a pair of Vanillion Cleave, which is your flash threat, and also just a way to disrupt combo and get some hand information for future turns. But yeah, this is our Jeskai control deck. It's been putting up a lot of numbers on Magic Online, as well as team tournaments and paper events. So if you're looking for a good all-around control deck in Modern, I can't recommend anything else other than this right now. There is some tempo builds with like Geist of St. Trash and Spellqueller, but I don't think they're as good at just having a general utility against the format, whereas this deck is pretty well-rounded against most decks in Modern. There's a few oddball ones there, but that's Modern for you. You can't have anything that beats everything all the time. But yeah, currently I am 1-0 in a league, so let's get started with the first video here. We'll get this uploaded, and then we'll see you back for some more games.